Hi, I'm Amber,
And I'm Kirsten,
and you're listening to
Lurking in the Shadows. Hello.
Hi. I was waiting on
I thought you were going to go first.
No, I thought you were going to go first.
Well, since it's your case, I thought you would go first.
Yeah, but I thought you always say hi. So.
Sometimes you say hi first.
Do I?
I feel like for your cases you do. I don't know. Maybe not.
I don't know. I can't listen to my own voice, so I haven't listened to many of our cases. Admittedly. Oh.
Well, welcome back, or welcome if you're new.
Yes, hello. Welcome to the podcast. We are trucking right along here.
Mm-hmm. Excuse my appearance if you're watching on YouTube.
Oh, shut up.
I just washed my hair, so this is my natural hair. I didn't style it.
It's sexy.
Nor did I put on any makeup, because I just washed my face.
That's the best way. I clogged my pores with a little bit of makeup, so.
Oh, you look better than me.
That's because I need the makeup to look good.
Yeah, me too. That's why I look terrible.
All right. Well, today I am going to be doing another mob case. I enjoyed researching the first one, so this one is definitely a lot more than the last one. So I'm covering pretty much the rise and fall of the North Side Gang of Chicago.
And I feel like the last mob case you did, I think that was the episode we got the most comments and interactions on.
Yeah, so
a lot of people are into that.
I think it's quite interesting, and you will see throughout this one thing that I find like it's so little and stupid, but I find it so interesting about mobsters is all their nicknames. So I tried for any person I talked about, I tried to include their nickname because I think they are hilarious.
Yeah, like what was the one guy, Tony Bananas?
Yes,
in the last case. Yeah,
yep. So I always try and include the nicknames because I find it interesting. But yeah, so this is going to be a long one. So let's dive on in. The North Side Gang was founded in 1919, but like most mobs, it got its start from a small gang committing Whoa. It better not be this whole episode.
We're off to a great start.
Yay. Committing pickpockets and other petty crimes in the 42nd and 43rd wards in Chicago. This small gang was called the Market Street Gang. This small gang gained its attention during the circulation wars between the Chicago Examiner and the Chicago Tribune in the 1910s. One of the juvenile gangs in the Market Gang, so it was like little ones within this gang, called themselves the Little Hellions. One of the members was Dean O'Banion. Dean and this small gang met a man named Charles Reiser, aka the Ox. The gang started joining the Ox on safe cracking jobs because that is what he becomes known for. And the Ox becomes the gang's mentor. These members included future mafia leaders, including Dean O'Banion, Bugs Moran, and Jaime Wise. I will be covering the Ox, Dean O'Banion, who was the first leader of the North Side Gang, and Bugs Moran, who was the last leader of the North Side Gang. So first, I'm going to cover the Ox. He was born in 1878. However, I struggled finding a background on him until he started committing crimes and establishing a record. So in 1902, you see his first appearance with police when he is caught cracking a safe. When he was released on bail, he murdered the witness. So later that case was dropped. And in 1905, same situation happened where he was caught again safe cracking, and once he was released, the witness mysteriously disappeared, so the case was dropped. He did spend 30 days in prison in 1907 for assault with a deadly weapon. By 1909, he had made his way to Seattle, Washington, where he was arrested for burglary and murder. Once again, the witness magically disappears and the case is dropped.
Interesting.
Yeah, the early 1900s, man. He must not have been impressed with Seattle because he made his way back to Chicago. This is when the Ox met O'Banion and the gang began joining him with the safe cracking. His alias he was using at this time was Charles Shopes. He began investing his dirty money into real estate, including an apartment building in Chicago. At this time, he was on his second wife. His first wife died of asphyxiation, but there were rumors he told friends he had beat her to death when she threatened to go to the police.
Okay.
And I have a little note here, and it might be a little controversial, but I will say, if you are dating somebody in the mob, just don't go to the police, man.
Yeah. It's not going to end well.
Yeah, you're in it for life. If you have decided to marry a mobster, I feel like it's a life commitment at that point, and I wouldn't risk it. Now into the 1920s. This story, we're still talking about Ox, so this overlaps a little bit of the start of the North Side Gang, but I wanted to finish out the Ox's story, even though he wasn't technically like a full established member of the North Side Gang. So the Ox was a huge influence then on the North Side Gang and getting their criminal careers started. One of the Ox's partners, named Clarence White, had mentioned he was questioned by police specifically about a safe that they had stolen together and split the contents. The Ox did what the Ox does, and he killed White, but made it look like a suicide, so he got away with it, like he did all the other ones.
Yeah.
And then he did this one more time in 1921 when another partner named John Mahoney was arrested while safe cracking and started talking to the police. So the Ox murdered him. In 1921, the Ox was in the hospital recovering from an attempted robbery, but I couldn't find like what his injuries were. When his wife came in to visit him, he requested a gun to protect himself from his enemies.
In the hospital?
In the hospital, yep. A gunshot rang out, and when nurses entered the room, his wife was crying over his dead body. She told police he shot himself while they were hugging, but her account was a little fishy. But of course, police wrote it off as a suicide, and she received his fortune. The Ox, like I said, was the mentor to these men, but he didn't really like continue running with them. He was instead doing his own thing. But I thought he was worth mentioning to the end. His life was short-lived, but he definitely had a huge role in kind of getting the North Side Gang started with safe cracking, you know?
Yeah.
So the wars between the gangs of Chicago really took off with the start of Prohibition. And I am going to give you a little synopsis on Prohibition because I wasn't sure if everybody knows all the details. So Prohibition in the United States occurred from 1920 to 1933. It was a nationwide ban of the manufacture, sale, and transportation of alcoholic beverages under the 18th Amendment. Specific groups like the Women's Christian Temperance Union and the Anti-Saloon League were big supporters of the 18th Amendment. The aim was to address social problems with alcoholism and associated crimes. However, the enforcement of no alcohol proved difficult and led to people doing what people do and finding a way around the law, leading to
Same today.
leading to such things as the rise of organized crimes, example being Al Capone. Illegal operations known as bootlegging and speakeasies began popping up, and let's be real, no one was following the law at the time, but eventually the government needs their money, and the sales tax on alcohol became very tempting, so leading to the repeal in 1933. Because the government needs
It's all about money.
they need their money, so alcohol came back and they got their tax.
Yep.
The North Side Gang was predominantly Irish Catholic mob who was led by Dean O'Banion, who quickly took over the breweries and distilleries in the north side of Chicago. Within months, they had taken over all of north of Chicago, bootlegging, burglarizing local businesses, and running an illegal gambling ring. Let me introduce you guys to the first mob boss, Charles Dean O'Banion, born July 8th, 1892, to Irish Catholic parents in central Illinois. He moved to Chicago with his father and older brother after his mother had died. They moved to a prominently Irish neighborhood called Little Hell that was known for its crime. When he was young, friends and family would call him by the nickname Deanie. He attended church with his family and also joined the choir in Chicago's Holy Name Cathedral. Of course, those things could not keep the interest of O'Banion, and instead he started his criminal life with the Market Street Gang in 1919. He only went to jail for assault and safecracking in his life, and that was early in his criminal career. One of the little operations he worked as an amateur criminal was at the McGovern's Liberty Inn. This is where O'Banion worked as a waiter. He would distract his customers as the gang members hit the coat closet. They would also drug some of their customers, and when they left after being drugged, the gang would jump them and rob them. This was called slipping them a Mickey Finn, which is giving them a license to drink.
A Mickey Finn.
Yep, a Mickey Finn. I had to look it up.
I never heard of that.
Yeah. O'Banion also used his conversational skills to get in with the local politicians, helping them with their campaigns, of course, for a price.
Of course.
O'Banion was definitely the brains of the operation because he had a little bit of bootlegging experience before Prohibition was even a thing. In 1919, when O'Banion was walking down the street, he saw a parked liquor truck. He decided to knock out the driver and steal the truck, selling the whiskey to a local saloon for $15,000, which would be equal to $236,000 in today's money.
Damn again.
But when it came to Prohibition, O'Banion had a more thought-out operation. He set up connections with liquor distributors and beer suppliers in Canada and began a higher-end bootlegging business. With his better inventory, he was able to get across the border. Other rival gangs struggled to obtain anything but homemade hooch and moonshine to distribute. By the end of 1921, O'Banion had destroyed all of his competition on the north side. This included the richest parts of the north side situated right on Lake Michigan. Within 3 years, O'Banion was hitting his peak in his bootlegging operation. Jesus Christ.
That funny accent keeps coming out like in the last episode.
I don't know who this is, but she needs to go. I don't have time for another personality right now. Jesus, I need to do things. Okay. Within 3 years, O'Banion was hitting his peak in his bootlegging operations, bringing in around $40 million in those years.
Holy moly.
That I didn't even convert that because 40 million back it
Oh.
was like trillion jillion when I tried to convert it.
Oh my.
Yeah, because that was 1920. So
Yeah. Wow. I literally can't imagine.
yeah. Two of the biggest payout jobs was when he stole $100,000 worth of whiskey from a rail yard. And another time he broke into a distillery and stole 1,750 barrels of whiskey. He had a busy 1921 because he also married his wife, Viola Caniff, and found his interest in William Schofield's flower shop.
That seems random.
Yeah, but there's always a method to a mobster's madness.
I'm sure there is.
So he enjoyed making flower arrangements as a hobby. So he purchased the shop and would do the flower arrangements for the mob members, when they died or weddings or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, the flower shop was intended to hide his illegal operations and give him a quote unquote headquarters for his people, which was ran out of the upstairs rooms above the shop.
Sneaky.
Yes. Yeah. I'd be like, ooh, lovely. Oh, these tulips. And so what about the hit we were talking about?
Right. But it's kind of like random though. You go from murderer mobster to I like making flowers.
Yeah, and you know what?
Like, what a random hobby.
I bet he was really good at it.
He probably was.
Yeah. He probably had I feel like men like that, being like a gangster and that have that little soft side. I bet he was really passionate about it.
Probably.
At this time, the more notorious South Side Gang of Chicago, ran by none other than Al Capone and Johnny Torrio, aka Papa, were also getting into the bootlegging industry. The South Side Gang was an Italian mob who did not limit themselves due to religion like the North Side Gang. Al Capone's gang operated a prostitution ring as well as capitalizing on other opportunities to make more money and all other illegal activities, of course. Mm-hmm. This made the North Side Gang members angry, specifically Bugs Moran, who I'm covering in a minute. This caused more tension between the gangs' fight over the bootlegging businesses and the division of the turf. This war between the two gangs becomes known as the Bootleg Battle of the Marne, which is a reference to a World War I battle. Yeah, I didn't get the reference either, so I had to Google it. George Clarence Moran, aka Bugs. Here we go. Was born. This was the only gangster that you knew about, right?
Yeah, him and Al Capone. Those are like the two names that stuck out to me.
So, he was born August 21st, 1891, in St. Paul, Minnesota. His father, Julius Cunnin, was a French mason worker, and his mother, Marie Deanna Gobel, was a Canadian immigrant. George Moran was not his birth name. He was named Adelard Leo Cunnin, who attended Creighton Catholic High School. He was raised in a very Catholic home. His father had a very bad temper that Adelard developed himself, causing a lot of clashing between the son and father. By the time he reached the age of 18, Adelard ran away to Chicago. There, he joined a young gang that operated out of a warehouse near the Chicago River, committing petty crimes and racketeering. He was caught in a horse stealing ring. He was involved in a robbery where a police officer was killed, and also participated in a good old train robbery. When they eventually got busted by police, when asked for his name, the first thing he thought of was George Moran. This is where his name came from, and he completely stepped into this new persona and decided to ramp up his criminal career with this new name. Mostly sticking to burglary and larceny. Help me out here. I'm having a stroke. Larceny. Okay, larceny. Moran was put behind bars 3 times before the age of 21.
Oh my.
Yeah. Bugs was like the third man in charge, but he made his opinions known. He made it clear to everyone how much he was disgusted with Al and how he ran his business with the prostitution ring. The turf war between Bugs and Al did not take long before the tension turned deadly. Johnny Torrio and the Southside Gang were the first to get all the gangs together in Chicago to split down the territories and try keeping the peace between everyone. They also decided to share the Ship, which was a huge casino. And O'Banion also got some rights to run some business in they're gonna rip me apart of how I say this, Kirsten. Already. Cicero, Illinois.
Never heard of it, so I can't correct
No,
you.
it's fine. It is what it is. Where the Southside Gang had operated. This little treaty held up for 3 years before the Southside Gang technically was responsible for the first bloodshed after O'Banion started moving more of his operations into the Southside territory, causing extra tension. O'Banion was trying everything he could to get Torrio and Capone put away without him directly killing them or, starting out an all-out war. So in February 1924, he tried to frame them with the murder of John Duffy, who was a gun for hire out of Philly. When a morning after a night of drinking, Duffy woke up to his wife dead in bed next to him, he panicked and contacted a friend for help who put him in contact with O'Banion.
He called a friend to help his dead wife?
Oh, no, he went like, help me, I have a dead body. Get me out of this.
Yeah, but did he see how she with her obvious wounds?
I didn't read if there was he beat her or strangled her. I didn't get that.
Okay, so he killed her.
Yeah, Duffy did. He was drunk.
Okay.
He woke up.
Okay.
Okay, so Duffy woke up in bed next to his dead wife, and he had killed her in a drunken rage or whatever.
Okay.
Yes.
I was like, how did he not hear someone killing his wife
No,
in the middle of the night?
he did it.
He
So
killed her.
he's saying hello, I have a dead body. Please help me.
Gotcha.
So he called up O'Banion. He got in contact with O'Banion. He agreed to help Duffy, telling him to meet him outside of Four Deuces, which was a club owned by the Southside Gang. We're 12 years old. A witness reported Duffy getting into a Studebaker driven by O'Banion and another man around 8 p.m. The next morning, he was found shot 3 times in the head with a .38 and dumped in a snowbank. Because Duffy was last seen at the Capone's club, of course, he became the first suspect, which resulted in police attention into the nightclubs full of illegal happenings,
Yeah.
Which I'm sure pissed off Al Capone, but
Mm-hmm.
he was ruled out in the crime, and the attention soon turned to O'Banion because of the witnesses. They were never able to get enough evidence to charge O'Banion. He allegedly took Duffy out on a county road and somehow got Duffy to get out of the car and shot him 3 times and then dumped his body in hopes that the Southside Gang would take the heat. The next attempt to screw over Torrio and Al by the North Side Gang was in the form of a double cross, and it was almost the last straw. In May 1924, O'Banion and Torrio both had shares in the Sibin Brewery, but O'Banion got information that a police raid was happening on a specific date. While keeping this to himself, he asked if he could sell his part to Torrio, and he agreed, giving O'Banion $500,000 for his share. The same night of the raid, O'Banion's last shipment left the brewery. Torrio and multiple South Side gang members were arrested and released on bail paid by Torrio. Even though Torrio lost the brewery, he was also out $500,000 by O'Banion, double cross, and suffered the humiliation. He stayed peaceful because he did not want to start a war. O'Banion was on thin ice for around 6 months when on November 3rd, 1924, Dean O'Banion had a heated argument on the phone with Angelo Jenna about a debt Jenna racked up at the Ship, which was the casino.
Mhm.
When members from both gangs, including Alan O'Banion, sat down to figure out the week's earnings in the casino, Jenna's big cash bet and marker that were unpaid was mentioned and brought up. Al Capone said about dropping the marker owed as a business gesture because the Jenna crime family had their own reputation.
Okay.
So the Jenna gang that ruled over Little Italy in Chicago was ran by 6 Jenna boys known as the Terrible Jennas. The gang kind of operated a little everywhere, but once they started to intrude on the North Side territory, O'Banion told Torrio about it, but he did nothing, so O'Banion took matters into his own hands. He began stealing and hijacking the Jenna's supplies they were running in the North Side. So before this casino incident, things were already tense between the Jennas and the North Side gang. Instead of O'Banion listening to Capone about dropping the debt, he threatened Jenna on the phone, telling him to pay his debt by the end of the week. The Jenna family took this as a huge insult, and by November 8th, Mike Merlot, who was the more peaceful leader of the Sicilian Mafia, had died, giving the Jenna boys the opportunity to put out the hit on O'Banion that Merlot refused to put out because he wanted to keep things peaceful.
Yeah.
So O'Banion owned the flower shop, and Frankie Yale, who was a mobster from Brooklyn, was sent to the flower shop to get the arrangements for Merlot's funeral. But in reality, what Yale was doing there was scoping out the place and get the layout of the flower shop for O'Banion's hit. On November 10th, Yale, Albert Anselmi, and John Scalise, who became one of South Side Gang's most successful hitmen, entered the flower shop where O'Banion was picking flowers in the back room. When Yale shook O'Banion's hand, the other 2 men shot him in the chest and 2 shots to the throat. Then a final shot to the back of his head while he was face down on the floor. This killing started a 5-year-long war between the 2 Chicago gangs. O'Banion now dead. This put second in command Jaime Wise as the new leader of the North Side Gang. Of course, there needed to be retaliation. So in January 1925, Al Capone became the target again in his car near the 55th Street in Chicago. Al Capone was uninjured, but a few of his associates were injured. He was just in his car, and they had just fired a couple of shots, and they had missed him, and then that was that. It was not that exciting, but it was still trying to take out Al, you know?
Yeah.
Imagine living your whole... I swear Al was probably living his whole life as like, oh my God, who's taking me out next?
Right, probably.
Next, Wise, who was terminally ill with cancer, set his sights on the South Side Gang Mafia boss of the time, Johnny Torrio. He was leading the gang like he had nothing to lose, honestly. Wise was. Vincent Ducci and Bugs Moran were Wise's right-hand men and set out to take out the enemy's boss. On January 24th, 1925, Moran, Ducci, and Wise ambushed Torrio outside of his home with his wife. He was shot several times by the men. He ended up surviving and fully recovering, but this was the last event for him before he handed over the Southside Gang officially to Al Capone, and then he fled to Italy, cutting all ties to the mafia. Yep. The Southside Gang came back at Wise in August 1926 when Ducci and Wise were near the Standard Oil building near South Michigan Avenue. Some of Al Capone's gunmen opened fire on the men, but Ducci and Wise were not injured. With a failed hit under their belts, the North Side Gang still had something to prove. This is when Al Capone became the next target once again on September 20th, 1926. I mean, you'll notice like gang wars. I mean, that's what it is. It's back and forth.
Yeah.
On September 20th, 1926, Wise and the Northside Gang stationed up outside of Al Capone's headquarters in Cicero, Illinois. I really hope that's how you say it.
That sounds right.
They were at Hawthorne Inn in a brigade of 10 vehicles. They lined up all the cars outside where they tried to get Al to come to the window. They opened up fire with their Thompson machine guns and shotguns, unloading over 1,000 rounds into the first floor of the building. Paul Rica, one of Capone's acquaintances, saw the cars coming down the street and was able to pre-warn Capone, so he snuck out the back, never being hit by a single bullet.
You got lucky.
Yeah. They came to a truce, but that went out the window only 3 weeks later on October 11th. Wise parked around the corner from O'Banion's old flower shop and the Northside Gang's headquarters. He was accompanied by his bodyguard Sam Peller, gangster Patty Murray, attorney William O'Brien, and O'Brien's investigator Benjamin Jacobs. When they rounded the corner to cross the street, 2 gunmen came out of hiding and opened fire on the men. Wise and Murray were fatally shot. Peller, the bodyguard, pulled out his .38 and shot in the direction of the men, accidentally striking Wise as he was falling to the sidewalk. O'Brien was hit 4 times. He staggered to a stairwell and collapsed. Peller and Jacobs fled back to their cars with bullets still following them. This was a big statement, attacking them outside of the headquarters like they did with Al Capone. Frank Nitti, who was Al Capone's bodyguard, was given the credit for the murder of Wise that day. This now officially put Bugs Moran as the mafia boss of the Northside Gang, but I also found a report that Vincent Ducci helped Bugs run operations. Here's a little on Vincent. He was an interesting character. His nickname was the Schemer, because he was a man who loved to drink, and when he did, all the plans he talked about flowed as steady as the drinks did. On the streets, the Ducci was a ruthless son of a bitch. He loved intimidation, and one time, when a female shop owner refused to pay her dues, Ducci had a bigger woman beat her up while he watched.
Oh.
He loved jokes and would dress up, and even starred in a 1923 porno titled Bob's Hot Story.
What a lame name.
It's 1923. They couldn't be like, I don't know.
Yeah.
No, I was trying to think less inappropriate, but the only thing that came to my mind is way inappropriate. On April 4th, 1927, Officer Dan Healy arrested Vincent Ducci. They had found a .45 pistol on him. Healy had a reputation for being a violent officer against criminals in and outside of his job. While waiting for transportation, Ducci didn't want anyone touching him while he was standing handcuffed, and also threw out a few insults at Healy. So Healy did the violent thing and slapped Ducci in the face and brandished his gun, threatening to shoot him. Once he was in the vehicle with his 2 associates that were also being arrested, There are different accounts on what happened, but Ducci was in the end shot 3 times by Healy on the floor of the car, handcuffed and unarmed. So you can make your conclusions there.
Yeah.
Moran attempted another hit on a gang member of Capone's gang, but failed. Bugs and Capone went back and forth, pissing each other off in petty ways. Bugs would steal Capone's beer runs, so then Bugs' dog track burned down, and then guess what? A few days later, Capone's dog track burned down as well. So between all these, this pretty much sums up the last attempts for Moran and Al Capone before the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. On Valentine's Day, February 14th, 1929, at 2122 North Clark Street, which is the garage where Bugs parked his shipments, 7 of his men were there that morning around 10:30 waiting for a delivery. The 7 men were Albert. All right, well, already, just know I'm going to butcher probably every single one of them. Albert Kachelkek, who's Bugs' brother-in-law, Adam Heyer, the bookie. I like to give nicknames. I will go into detail of these people later, but I'll keep it simple for now. So Adam Heyer, the bookie, Albert Winshak, I'll call him the cleaner. The brothers Peter and Frank Greensburg, they were the enforcers. There were 2 other men there, Reinhard H. Schwimmer and John May, who was a mechanic and friend who was working on a truck that day, and he had his dog Highball there with him. Soon, a black Cadillac with 5 men inside rolled into the garage. The 2 front passengers were wearing police uniforms, while the 3 in the back had regular clothing on. At the same time Bugs was about to roll in, he saw the vehicle that looked like a cop car, and he thought a raid was happening, so he continued around the corner to a coffee shop to wait for everything to be over. The 2 wearing the uniforms directed the 7 men that were there waiting to line up and face the wall. The men took out a Tommy machine gun and sprayed the line of men 3 times back and forth with around 70 bullets. Clark and May were still alive after, but were killed with a sawed-off shotgun blast. The gunman left out the front door with the 3 men dressed as civilians with their hands in the air, with the other 2 uniformed men behind them, escorting them with guns. And the public was none the wiser to what they had just done.
Yeah.
The neighbors heard Highball barking, so they called police. Upon arrival, Frank Gussenberg was alive and crawled 20 feet with multiple gunshots. He was taken to the hospital, where police tried desperately to get him to say who shot them, but he never gave any names and died not long after.
Damn.
Yep, never snitched. The newspapers jumped all over this, which caused a lot of shock throughout the community because, I mean, mass murders were not very common, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
This attack scared Bugs, so he went to the hospital, claiming that he had the flu. He stayed there for 4 days. While there, he got a message to the head of the detectives, John Edgen, stating he didn't know who did it, but, quote, only Capone kills like that. It only took a few hours for multiple agencies to arrive on scene. The Chicago Police, the Attorney General, and the coroner, Herman Bunsen. And I will talk a lot about, I'll bring up Bunsen a bunch, so just remember that that is the coroner. All started their own investigation. They all tried to stay out of each other's way. Chicago Deputy Major Frederick D. Silloway made a premature announcement stating that police were involved with witnesses seeing the men exit. He did later take it back, but by this time, newspapers had already printed the headlines. Yeah.
Darn media.
Mm-hmm. The next day, and could you imagine, like, back in the 1920s, you'd be like, how many hours you spent printing out everything, and you'd be like, "Ah, take it
Right.
back."
Yeah.
The next day, Bunsen called for a reenactment of the massacre in the garage. They tried to piece together the info they had to properly act out the massacre. They even had Highball the dog there. To help assist in this, Bunsen gathered people with sway in the politics of Chicago, one of these men being president of the Colgate Palmolive Peak Company, Bert Macis. Macis hired Calvin Goddard, who was an expert in ballistics, to set up a lab in Chicago with his team and equipment he needed to help in the investigation. He looked over the Tommy guns the Chicago police used at the time, and he stated those were not the weapons used. He had plenty of bullets and casings to look over from the scene. The police began questioning close neighbors to the garage. Two neighbors across the street from the garage had similar stories that police thought could be a lead. Minnie Arvidsson, who owned a rooming house, told police two men who said they were taxi drivers took a room at the front of the house to overlook the garage. Later identified as the lookouts and having association with Capone, these men went by Byron Bolton and James Morand, aka Jimmy the Swede. I looked up all these nicknames because I just love it.
Yeah,
It's so funny.
they're interesting. Yeah.
Yes. Think about what your nickname would be. A second story from a landlady down the street, from down the street, stated a man claiming to be a taxi driver again who arrived in his room around 9 a.m. and by 9:30 two men would join him. They would stay until 3:30 in the afternoon when they would leave together. When she was shown multiple photos of suspects, she picked out Harry Kewell out, who was a member of the Purple Gang. Okay, so yes, this story has lots of gangs and lots of names. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Girlfriend, me and my names. You know how hard this was? I'm real proud of myself, okay?
Yeah, I'm sure it's hard to keep all the names straight while you're researching.
Yeah, I make a comment later where I was like, later I bring up this guy's name and I'm like, I know he was in here. And I'm like 26 pages deep into this thing and I'm trying to find where this guy's name is in my research. Yeah, it's tough. Okay, so the Purple Gang was a prominently Jewish mob in Detroit, Michigan. I had to dig to figure out how this gang snuck its way into here. So what I found out is that the Purple Gang was run by the Bernstein brothers, who were dealing Canadian.
You're going to say Bernstein Bears.
Close. They were dealing Canadian liquor with Capone. Moran had recently started trusting the Purple Gang for dealings, so when the one brother, Abe Bernstein, called up Bugs and told him a delivery of bootleg liquor would be delivered the next morning, he lined up his men for the delivery, which is the delivery that morning then. When Harry was questioned by police, he had a solid alibi. To shake things up a bit, police decided to raid a lot of the speakeasies trying to get Capone to sweat a little. But it just cost Capone some money. That was it. By the way, side note on good old Al here. During the massacre and for over a month after, Al Capone was conveniently in Miami. And when he was subpoenaed on March 12th back to Chicago on an unrelated bootlegging charge, he had his doctor write this note stating he was suffering from pneumonia. So here's the note. Quote, "It would be dangerous for him to leave the mild climate of southern Florida and go to the city of Chicago. There would be a very grave risk of collapse, which might, they probably just typed that wrong, which might result in the death from a recurrent pneumonia."
wonder how much he paid that doctor.
right? So surprisingly, I'm surprised. I mean, maybe law enforcement didn't have as much to be doing back in the day, but
Mm-hmm.
they sent the FBI to investigate this claim from Al Capone and
Hmm.
got testimonies from witnesses saying he was attending public events to the judge who refused his request to stay in Florida and required him to be back in court on March 19th. So that literally just a little side story on Al there because I didn't want to focus on the Southside Gang, but
Mm-hmm.
that was him while this is all going on for a month. So he didn't get back into Chicago until March. So now we're back to on February 22nd. A car fire in a garage on Wood Street was reported. When police arrived, they found a dismantled and burned 1927 Cadillac sedan. After investigation, they believed an axe, saws, and torch were used on the vehicle, and they also found a police siren laying away from the car. In the car, they found a burned hat and coat and a Tommy gun magazine and a Luger pistol. After questioning around the area, a doctor's office reported a man that came in with burns, but when he was told he had to wait, he left. When police looked into the owner of this vehicle, they found it was bought by James Morton on December 15th, 1928 in Los Angeles, California. He paid $350 for it. Unfortunately, this name did not provide any leads for police. They looked up who was paying for the garage and found a man going by Frank Rogers with an address located right next to Circus Cafe, which was run by the mob boss Claude Maddox, aka Screwy. And of course, he had ties to Capone. After searching Maddox's place, they found a connection to the Egan's Rats gang in St. Louis, Missouri. This gang in the mid-20s, before the massacre, joined forces with the Purple Gang I had mentioned earlier. After talking to police in St. Louis, they found out there were other crimes committed there where men dressed up as police to commit their crimes. The St. Louis police provided a name of one of their top suspects, Frank Burke. Frank stood out because he had a missing front tooth. On the day of the massacre, the chauffeur of the Chicago Board of Education witnessed the police drivers that day, and one of them was missing a front tooth. Coincidence?
I think not.
So on February 27th, a second vehicle, a 1926 Peerless, was found blown up in the suburbs of Chicago between First and Harvard Avenue. Another police siren was found, shotgun shells of the same brand used in the massacre, and the notebook of Winshak, one of the victims, was found. The plates on the vehicle contained the first few same digits the Chicago police used, so permanent plates. Some believe the second car was to throw the police off, and some believe this was meant to be a statement and could also indicate a second vehicle involved in the incident. I don't know what I believe in that sense.
Yeah.
While Capone is in Miami, a number of his gang members were arrested and questioned. Jack McGurn, who was known as one of history's most notorious hitmen. Other members arrested were John Scalise and Albert Anselmi and Rocco's Emeli. The first two men were acquitted for murdering a police officer before. Police tried to charge all three men with the murders, but the charges were dropped due to the lack of evidence for the massacre. Like they tried to get them for the whole thing, but they
Yeah.
don't have any evidence yet. I think with the pressure from police and Capone nowhere to be found, it seemed like his guys were looking for a way to get the heat off of them. So
Mm-hmm.
Scalise and Selmy, who were both questioned by the police, and another of Capone's men, Joe Ginta, met with Capone's longtime rival, Joe Alo. Capone got word they were planning to assassinate him and take over his territory with this impending double cross. Capone invited the men to a nice dinner at one of his restaurants called the Plantation in their honor. That evening, Capone beat these men to death with a baseball bat and shot their bodies, which they were not found then until May 8th. So that was just, and those, if you remember earlier, those were the men who also helped in killing Wise.
Okay.
Yes, I know it's so many names back and forth. It's a lot.
Yeah.
The investigation of who killed all 7 men died down until December of 1929. Fred Burke drunkenly drove into another car in St. Joseph, Michigan. When patrolman Charles Skelly tried to help Burke, he shot him 3 times and left. Skelly died 3 hours later. Police went and tore apart Burke's house looking for him, and in his home they found $310,000 stolen from a Wisconsin bank, 2 Tommy guns, 9 ammo drums, 6 tear gas bombs, 2 rifles, a sawed-off shotgun, and around 5,000 rounds of ammunition.
Oh my God.
That's a gangster's house right there.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
After the weapons were looked at, it was determined to have been used in the massacre. The Tommy gun and the shotgun.
Mm-hmm.
But these guns were also used in the assassination of gangster Frankie Yale. 18 months earlier in Brooklyn, he was chased down and shot by a group of men driving a Buick. He was struck in the head by a shotgun and a Tommy gun. Burke was finally arrested in March 1931, but by this time, no more evidence had come out about the massacre, so they had more evidence of Burke committing the Frankie Yale murder versus the massacre, so he was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Frankie. Burke died in prison in 1940. So on November 7th, 1931, Bunsen, so this is the coroner, closed his investigation, believing anyone who was involved had died except for Burke, who was in prison, and his final report stated the killings were by persons unknown. 4 years later, in January 1935, one of Capone's gang members, who was one of the lookouts for the massacre, was arrested on other charges. His name was Byron Bolton. He was also mentioned earlier as one of the lookouts.
Yeah.
And this is a prime example. This was, I think, the name that I was researching, and I was like, I know I saw this name earlier. He was questioned by the FBI and started talking about the massacre. He gave the names of the 5 men involved. Fred Gietz, a.k.a. Shotgun, Gus Winkler, Fred Burke, a.k.a. Killer, Ray Nugent, and Bob Carey. He also stated that Al Capone gave his orders for the assassination of Bugs. When the killers arrived to the garage, none of them could identify who Bugs was and what he looked like, so they decided to kill everyone. He claimed to have had nothing to do with the massacre. The year before this, Winkler's wife, Georgette, provided the same names in her memoirs. Arthur J. Bialik, who wrote The St. Valentine's Day Massacre, the untold story of the gangland bloodbath that brought down Al Capone, with author William J. Helmer. Bialik was a special investigator for Cook County State Attorney's Office after serving for the Chicago Police Department. He had many other incredible positions in law enforcement, and he had committed 60 years of service, mostly dedicated to organized crime in Illinois. He concluded in his investigation that Jack McGurn had assembled all the same four men, Burke, Winkler, Gietz, and Carey, but instead of Ray Nugent, he believed that Tony Accardo, Tony, aka Joe Butter or Big Tuna, becomes boss of the Southside Gang after a nearly 8-decade criminal career with the mob. His possible involvement in this massacre was a turning point in his criminal career, and I would love if I could get Kirsten to cover the Southside Gang sometime. So she would, cover Tony in there. After the Northside Gang had lost 7 gang members and gunmen, Bugs was able to hang on to his territory for half of the 1930s. Jack Machine Gun McGurn was murdered in 1936, and Bugs Moran was suspected, but the Northside Gang member Frank Nitti was also thought to be a possibility because McGurn had been causing himself some trouble in the gang. Since Bugs left the Northside Gang in 1935, I think the Southside Gang took care of him. After Bugs had left the gang, it had quickly dissolved. The Southside Gang took over most of the territory then. Since Prohibition wasn't bringing in money anymore, gambling was the main income now. Leaving the gang did not mean leaving the criminal life, though, for Bugs. He stuck to fraud and robbery mostly. Life for Moran by 1939 had really gone downhill. On April 30th, he was convicted of trying to cash $62,000 in fraudulent checks. He was posted bond but was arrested again and did not get out until December 21st of 1944. When Moran got out of jail, he couldn't even rub 2 pennies together. And this is just 17 years after being one of the wealthiest mobsters in Chicago.
Yeah.
On June 28th, 1945, Moran robbed a tavern in Dayton, Ohio. He was arrested on July 6, 1946 for this and was sentenced to 20 years. After serving 11 years, he was paroled in 1956. As soon as he got out, he was arrested again for a different robbery of a bank in Ansonia, Ohio in 1945. He was sentenced to 10 years in 1957 for that crime. Bugs Moran would die of lung cancer at Leavenworth Federal Prison in Kansas on February 25th, 1957. He was 63 years old and was only a few months into his 10-year term.
Wow.
Yes. So now,
You got out easy, I guess.
yeah, I mean, he kind of just lived. I mean, he was poor, but he kind of lived out his life.
Mm-hmm.
And then to end this out, I wanted to give just a few little facts that I had about each victim, even though they are mobsters. Some of them, some cool facts, some just standard facts, especially because of the time period. It was hard to find information on them, but
yeah, I'm sure.
James Clark was born in 1887 in Krojank, Germany, and he was the brother-in-law and bodyguard of Bugs. Peter, aka Goosey, was born in 1888, and Frank Gussenberg, aka Tight Lips, born 1893, were brothers, and they were top gunmen for Moran and were contract killers. And if you remember, I would love to point out that Frank died by his name as Tight Lips because he did not snitch. He's the one that survived till the end and died in the hospital. So,
Okay.
tight lip to the end, baby.
Yeah, the name was fitting.
Yeah. The only info on Adam Hare was that he was born in 1889. He was an accountant for the Northside Gang. He went by 4 other names, including Frank Meyer, Adam Hayers, John Snyder, and Frank Snyder. John May was the one person that was the wrong was one there was two people, but he was definitely the main person that was like wrong place, wrong time for him on the day of the massacre. May had a wife and 7 kids. He was never an actual member of the North Side Gang. Every few months when he needed money, he would do various jobs for the gang. The gang treated him well and he kept his mouth shut with all the information he had from the jobs. The day he was working on one of Moran's vehicles in that garage, making him a victim, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Albert Winshak, aka Gorilla Al, was born in 1893. His criminal career with the Northside Gang started by running a few speakeasies for Bugs. He later operated cleaning and dyeing stores, still working for Bugs. He allegedly was built like and looked a lot like Bugs. And on the day of the massacre, his sharp suit he wore, which is similar style to Bugs, apparently, made the men think that he was Bugs when he had arrived. So they got started in the murders once he had arrived. And with this theory, I guess to me, if you think about it, it was unfortunate, but it kind of saved Bugs as the boss that day because
Yeah.
Bugs was coming to that meeting that morning. He had just the Cadillac had already gotten there, so he just kept on driving. Renard H. Schwimmer was an optometrist born in 1899. He, of course, used his eye doctor status to help cover up his criminal activities. Most of his criminal activities included gambling, and he honestly just liked hanging out with the gang. So on the day of the massacre, he was another person who was wrong place, wrong time. He was honestly just hanging out with the gang that day and wound up being a victim. So yeah, that is the rise and fall of the North Side Gang. The one that I think a lot of people don't. I didn't know much about it. I feel everybody knows the South Side Gang and Al Capone.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't know really anything about it. Just Bugs Moran.
Yep. So it was quite interesting to research. I did enjoy it. It's a lot of work,
Yeah.
but I enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, give us a thumbs up on YouTube or leave a comment elsewhere if you want us to cover the South Side Gang.
Yes.
If you're into these kind of episodes.
It's not we. Kirsten will cover if you would like.
No. But on our podcast.
Yes, that's right. Lurking in the shadows.
Yeah.
Well, make like a shadow and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at
Lurking in the Shadows podcast.
Check us out on TikTok at
Lurking in the Shadows pod.
Any questions, concerns, or case suggestions, shoot us an email at
Lurking in the Shadows podcast at gmail.com, and keep lurking around for our next episode.
Bye.
Bye.
How long was it?